Right, so we got really big stuff going on yesterday and actually the day before as well. But the first story I wanted to bring up is the increase in cases, mainly in Ontario and Quebec, but it's also or Alberta and BC as well to an extent. But the topic is there a second wave? You already have Doug Ford and some of these people saying, yeah, we're in a second wave. Well, the problem is it really depends. Like, it really depends. If you're going strictly off cases, yeah, but there's many problems to that. Number one being, um, there's a lot of false positives. I've seen numbers, upwards of 50% are false positives. And I've also heard from experts that say when you test a population where are going to be a lot less susceptible, other words, young people, you're going to get even more false positives. And given the fact that I think the number is like 60% of new cases are people under 40, my guess is that a lot of these are false positives. And even if they are actual positives, it really doesn't matter that much because most of them are asymptomatic. So the point being is that, yeah, they have more cases, but are they in that key demographic? Like, my point would be, number one, the hospitalization and death numbers are more important because if we're having 1,000 new cases a day, but one person die, that's better than 10 cases a day, but two people dying, right? So the idea that we should be as worried about cases, I don't think is nearly as what, as we shouldn't be nearly as worried as what they're making it out to be. The numbers that we should be worried about are deaths, hospitalizations, and to a lesser extent, cases amongst elderly people, like in that, 65, 70 and up category. And the fact that they're not showing us those numbers, I think it's rather safe to assume that none of those are issues. The goal of the media on this kind of stuff is to scare the you know what out of people. And the best way of doing it would be to point out the amount of people that are dying or in the hospital, right? And since the fact that they're not doing that, they're resorting to cases, just goes to show that it's not a big deal. So again, we're not really in a second wave. We're in a second wave if you're judging it entirely based off cases, but there's so many other things involved that when you account for that, we're not really in a second wave. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is, again, Doug Ford. I mean, one of the worst. I mean, aside from Justin Trudeau, I think Doug Ford's one of the worst leaders. When it comes to this kind of stuff. And though again, a lot of this may just be him blindly deferring to the doctors. Like, that may be the case. But nonetheless, even if that is the case, you still need to be smart enough to recognize, hey, we've overreacted, to this whole situation in pretty much every shape, every form we possibly could have. I don't think there is any area, even, sub area, to where we've underreacted to this. And I mean, this is the big problem too, like you point out, that you talk to these people and they're so narrow-minded, it's not even funny. They think, we got to do this because we got to save lives. But again, they're so narrow-minded that they genuinely believe that there's no downside whatsoever to having these restrictions. Like, there's no downside whatsoever. You're not causing depression. You're not causing suicide. You're not causing businesses to go out of business. Like, again, like, they're so oblivious to these other things that it's not even funny. And this is the thing I just cannot stand about these people. But again, they're so sure they're correct because CBC or CTV told them there's a second wave and they should be really worried. So, but again, it's just pure insanity. The next big story I wanted to bring up is, again, it's out of the States, but it's still a big story nonetheless. In basically, um, Project Veritas caught Ilhan Omar and I think some other cases as well of ballot harvesting, of basically cheating. And the reason why this is such a big story is because you've had the Democrats and the mainstream media insist that this is a safe way of going about things when it clearly isn't. I mean, the numbers are very clear. Mail-in ballots are quite a bit more likely to be rejected and to be fraudulent than in-person ballots. So again, there's really no debate on this kind of stuff. And given the fact that again, Project Veritas just proving me right and proving people like me right as usual, in that they literally have stuff on camera that's undeniable but yet you still have these people trying to deny that it's not the case. Like, you still have it. And it's just pure insanity that you literally have stuff on video, clear as day, no questions asked, but yet you still have people trying to deny it. Like, it's just pure insanity. And this is where we're at in society these days, that you can literally have um, video evidence, contradicting people's worldview, and they don't change it. Like, they don't change it. I mean, the same thing goes with social media. Like, Project Veritas has, multiple people from pretty much every major social media company admitting or being caught in their bias when it comes to, the political bias. But when you talk to the average person, did they admit that they're wrong on the topic? Well, no, they don't. Again, so it's just pure insanity. Um, the next thing I wanted to bring up is from Jason Kenney, and he says, we're against the carbon tax. It harms our economy and isn't necessary. There are many ways we can be responsible stewards of the environment that don't involve creating new taxes that fall disproportionately on the little guy. And this is the other thing too, that they always make the argument of, oh no, you get your money back. Again, well, if that's the case, then what's the point of doing it in the first place? Like, if your employee, if some random guy came up to you and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna take 10% of your income, but I'll give it back to you 6 months down the road. Then what's the point of even doing it? Like, seriously, it makes no sense. And the other thing they bring up too is, oh, it only affects the big emitters or whatever, the big corporations. Well, that's really not true, because number one, if the big corporations didn't benefit from it in some way, shape, or form, they wouldn't go for it. And the other thing being is that they just pass the money off to the consumer. I mean, find me a business owner who's, when the carbon tax was implemented, just came and was like, yeah, I'm just going to take the hit. I'm going to take the money, whatever, 1, 2, 3%, blip. I'm just gonna eat that money. That's not going to happen, because most people don't have big enough margins so they can just take that hit. Like, most people don't. And even if they do, they're still probably not going to want to, right? So, and not to mention too, it's like I've literally probably put out a video like at least a year ago on this, in that the BC government's own numbers show the carbon tax doesn't work. They've had it for over a decade now. It does not work. But again, is that going to change people's mind on it? No, it's exactly what I say. Definitive evidence can be shown to prove people's worldview wrong. Do they admit it? No, they just double down. And again, they'll throw out the same accusations, the other way, to be fair, but they don't actually provide a whole heck of a lot of evidence. When it comes to their arguments on climate change, they'll simply link you a graph for a climate scientist saying this is true, but they don't actually prove anything, right? Because when it comes to climate change, no one is denying that the climate changes. What people are denying is um, that people have a significant impact on it. Again, so that what they'll always do to debunk you is, oh, they'll give you a graph that shows that the climate is changing, but again, it doesn't prove anything. That doesn't prove anything. So, and not to mention too, I mean, the other thing being is that the amount of reliable data, I mean, the left would argue this as well, but the amount of definitive data we have when it comes to temperature, it only goes back like 100, 120, maybe a little more amount of years depending on where you're at. And the data we have shows that there isn't warming. Like, the data we have shows there isn't. I mean, the warmest years were all long ago. The years with the most hurricanes, tornadoes, all that kind of stuff, it wasn't recently. But again, that's a different video in itself. This isn't, argue against climate change video. But again, the whole point being is, when it comes to Jason Kenney, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up. Um, I've had very mixed signals on him lately. I've never been a strong supporter. I've never been a strong supporter. The reason that I have been a tacit supporter is the alternative is socialism. Like, the NDP are socialists. Again, most of their supporters would deny that, but show me a government. Show me an area where a significant area where the NDP wants to cut, and then I'll admit that they're not socialists. But they don't have that. They want to keep increasing funding for healthcare. They want to bring in many. They want to spend a ton of money on climate change and all this garbage. There's not a government program that the NDP wants to reduce in size. There isn't one, which just makes them socialists. Again, it doesn't matter what you call yourself too. They say, oh no, we don't. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. If the KKK changed their name to the anti-racist group, would that no, it wouldn't change anything because they still have the same ideas. They still have the same people. So again, what you call yourself doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, this is literally like kindergarten levels of thinking, but you actually have to explain this to these people. So anyway, I mean, I mean, what I would suggest, I mean, obviously it doesn't really mean anything, but they need to be stronger. Like, they need to be as strong as they possibly can because you have nothing to lose. The Liberal government has already made it very clear that when it comes to Alberta, they could care less. It is going to be FU no matter what we try and do. So you might as well just be honest. You might as well just go for the gusto because they're gonna screw us over no matter what. I mean, the only way they wouldn't screw us over is to, give us some free stuff. But again, that's not going to fix the problem. It's just going to, rather than people being unemployed, they're dependent upon the government. You're really not getting anywhere. So yeah, I mean, they should be a lot stronger. I mean, I know they're challenging the carbon tax in the courts, but they really should be pulling a full court press when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like, stop dilly-dallying. Like, no, you need to be 100% we are against the carbon tax. It does not work, and there is no evidence to bring it in the first place, even if you do want to claim that. Again, there's no evidence that it works, even if you want to claim that climate change is this big issue. So anyway, um, the last thing I wanted to bring up is, again, I mentioned this before, but Trump, he banned efforts to indoctrinate government employees with divisive and harmful sex and race-based ideologies. Today, I've expanded that to ban people and companies that do business with our country, the United States military, government contractors, and grantees. Americans should not be taught to take pride. Americans should be taught to take pride in our great country, and if you don't, there's nothing in it for you. Now, I mean, it's a good point. Now, again, I don't really care what people think of Trump. I'm not a huge fan of him either. Same with Jason Kenney. That the problem is, again, the alternative is crazy. I think there's plenty of criticisms of people like Trump, like plenty. The problem is when you talk to the average person, they don't bring up any of them. They bring up the whole orange man bad, he lied on his taxes, he's a racist, he's a sexist, which all of those are complete BS, a complete BS. Just because you disagree with tax law doesn't mean that, again, their argument when it comes to Trump's taxes is he should be paying more than he's legally obligated to pay. Like, it's absolute insanity to suggest otherwise. Um, but anyway, yeah, like, it's a very good thing. I mean, and here's the thing too, like, are anyone in any major politician in the Conservatives? I mean, maybe Derek Sloan, but is Aaron O'Toole talking about stuff like this? Was McKay talking about stuff like this? Was Scheer talking about stuff like this? No, they weren't. They got a little more heavy-handed as of late, but I mean, it's too little, too late. I mean, the time to do that was long ago. So again, like I say, I'm not a huge fan, but he's doing a lot of stuff that is very good. I really don't care what people think. Um, Getting rid of this stupid, communist, socialist, crazy, sex and race-based garbage like critical race theory and all, which is basically, white people are racist no matter what, and um, other races can't be racist is basically their argument when it comes to critical race theory. Yeah, banning that is a good thing. And not only that, too, like, I mean, no one's talking about that in Canada. Like, are the Conservatives in Alberta or Saskatchewan talking about that? Not really, not really. So again, like, this is, I want to give credit where credit is due. I mean, and this isn't even biased. Do people know you're biased? Like, man, I've literally spent like a good part of my last two videos ragging on Doug Ford. But again, not the left would agree with Doug Ford, which is why they'll still throw out the bias card. But nonetheless, I mean, Doug Ford, I think, has done a terrible job, like terrible. Now again, I don't live in Ontario, so I'm not privy to, maybe there is some good things he's done. I don't know. But the one thing right now is that I don't care how much good you've done. If you're supporting destroying people's livelihoods for no reason, I don't care how good of a politician you are. I don't care how many good policies you're implementing or you want to implement. I could care less. Like, this is the biggest issue right now is if you're not for getting rid of this stupid, let's destroy people's livelihoods for no reason, um, yeah, I'm not going to support you. So that's step one when it comes to supporting a politician these days. So anyway, I'm gonna leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Um, Make sure you follow me on Twitter mainly, but also BitChute and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.